Okay, here we go, day 3 of our video lesson review. So today we're going to talk about cylinder heads. You guys are taking a look at your form that's online. So we'll just go right through the questions and help you get them answered. So what is a cylinder head and where is it located? The cylinder head is bolted to the very top of the engine block. Right above the cylinders, and it houses quite a few different components of for the operation of the motor. The components that we find in the cylinder head are obviously the most common are the valves. And so you have an intake valve and an exhaust valve. And those valves are designed to allow fuel in and then the exhaust and the burned up fuel out. And so that's what those are for. It also consists of valve springs. Okay, and the valve springs are designed to close the valves. Rocker arms, those are the component that transfers the energy from the camshaft to the through the push rods and then opens the valves. These are the rocker arms, which are up on top of the motor here. Okay, rocker arms are on top of the cylinder head. We have, if it is an OHV motor, which is again overhead valve, the engine will have push rods. If it is an OHC or an overhead cam motor, it will not have push rods. And so the push rods, again, as we had talked about previously, transfers the movement of the camshaft to the valves. Okay, so what does DHOC stand for? DHOC is for dual or double overhead cam. OHC is for overhead cam, and then OHV is for overhead valve. We've talked about that before the break as well. Okay, if an engine has double overhead cams, what is the purpose for the two camshafts, or what do they do? What is their function or operation? Or more importantly, what are they called? And in those situations with a double overhead cam, one camshaft would be for the intake valves, or considered the intake cam, and the other camshaft would be considered the exhaust cam, or control the exhaust valves. So they only have one particular function. The function of the camshaft is to do what? Camshaft opens valves. That's the job of the camshaft. What closes the valves? The valve springs. That is the job of the valve spring, is to close the valves. So the camshaft works to open the valves, the valve springs work to close the valves. Okay. In a cylinder head, we already talked about the different valves. You have an intake valve or an exhaust valve. And typically, the intake valve, if the valves, I guess what I should say is if the valves are a different size, one is larger than the other, the intake valve will always be the larger valve. It wants to be able to, or the engine needs to be able to breathe better, and the easier it is to get the fuel in, the more efficient that the engine will run. How many valves can a cylinder head have, or a cylinder itself, one single cylinder? It could have as many as 5. That's kind of a little bit, that's not all that common. It is very common though to have 4 valves per cylinder, 2 intake valves and 2 exhaust valves. That just allows, again, easier and more space or more opening for the fuel to get in and the exhaust to get out. That's the purpose for adding more valves. We drew a picture of the once before, so if we look at our valves in the cylinder head, if you just have 2 valves, they can only take up so much space with 2 valves, but if you have the same size cylinder and you create 4 valves, or you put 4 valves in there, you're able to create larger or more openings for the fuel and the exhaust to enter into the engine. So that's the purpose for having additional valves. Okay, we've already talked about what the rocker arm does, what the valve spring does, and if the engine is an OHC, what does it not have? Now, if you were not listening earlier in the video, then you would have missed that. So I'm not going to review that for you at this point. You'll have to go back. Now, this is a fairly short video today, or fairly short lesson, and so there's not much more to it. So the other things that we want to try to take a look at, or things that we need to remember, is this, is that, again, if the engine is an OHC or an overhead cam, the camshaft that would normally be in the engine block will be in the top of the cylinder head. Now, this engine is an OHV, so it actually has the push rods and to operate the rocker arms. This area across here where these rocker arms sit in these OHV motors, this is called the valve train because they're all in a row like a choo-choo train, and so sometimes this would be referenced as the valve train. That's about all we have for today. So a nice short video, a nice short lesson. Stay on top of those things. We will be back tomorrow for another lesson. We will go into tomorrow we will talk about timing chains and timing components and the power strokes, or the 4 strokes of an engine. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Again, don't forget to wash your hands. We hope to see you soon. Thanks.